looking back at that game, I stated on Saturday that it was an unusual game, a weird game, whatever you wanted to say. And you're going to have those games, and a lot of times those games you don't end up on the right side of. And we were able to make enough plays in the second half offensively to open the score up, defensively to keep them out of the end zone. Was great, and we came away with a 3-score win that when you're down 42 plus to 17 plus in time of possession, it doesn't typically work out that way. When another team rushes the ball 54 times, it doesn't usually work out that way. So our team stayed together. I thought special teams wise, we maybe had a slight advantage, and offense, like I said, we made enough plays down the stretch, and then defensively we just we bled a little bit. We bled a lot probably, but we're able to hold it together, especially down in the red zone to keep them in the field goal game. So bye week couldn't come at a better time for us, and there's some healing to do. There's some just catching our breath in general. I think that's the nature of football season, being 8 games in, and we got a big opponent ahead of us. So to get an extra time, as they have the same idea. I mean, they have the same thing in front of them too, that extra week leading up to that Eastern Washington game. So with that, I'll open up to questions.
Speaking of Eastern, you jumped ahead in the rankings. I don't know how much you guys talk about that or think about that, but is there any just comment on being the number 1 ranked team now?
I hadn't seen that yet. We've been working all morning. So whatever. I guess we get to play them on the field, and that'll ultimately determine how the two of us are after that game. You want to be positioned like we are at this point in the season to do all the things you can from a postseason perspective. But we got 3 regular season games left. The most important one is the one in front of us, and like where we're at, but we got a ways to go as far as that's concerned.
What is your approach to a bye week? How do you handle this time off?
Well, I think there's some healing certainly that needs to occur. I think there's some back to fundamental mindset that can occur, but it allows us more time to work on our next opponent. I think that's the biggest thing. But you put all those 3 things together, and that's what we're trying to accomplish. Our coaches will get out, myself included, get out and do some recruiting at the tail end of the week. So I think that's always an important part of what you accomplish in a bye week. But I think more than anything, it's an opportunity for us to kind of recalibrate, honestly, as a football team, and with the idea that we can put our best football on display from here on out.
Are there any updates to those injuries?
Yeah, I think the guys that didn't play on Saturday, I fully expect that they'll play in 2 weeks or less than 2 weeks now when we go to Cheney. I think the James Campbell conversation continues to trend the right way as far as him being, I think, available. We'll work through it this week. I'd probably say the same thing for Nate Stewart. So, as far as the health of our team, we got to work through that this week. We do have to heal, but I anticipate that we'll be as healthy as we've been in quite some time.
So Chase is one of those.
Yeah.
I know it's hard and impossible to prove, but do you think about the fact that you guys didn't play last spring and think about that you're going to have most of your starters, or all but one, I guess, for this next game? Is that something that you think maybe is a factor in that health?
Well, I think so. I think, those teams that played, there's an accumulation within the time period that's just you can't ignore. And I think at the same time, our guys, while we went through spring ball, were given the opportunity to continue to heal in some regard, but get stronger. Injury prevention is such a big part of the weight room, and when you have to go through a season that doesn't, like those teams did in the spring, that doesn't happen the same way. So, I think it has played an impact, and I think we'll see in particular how November plays out for all of us.
Through these 7 games, your 7-game winning streak, what has consistently been something that you've been most pleased with, and then something that going into this week and next week that you're hoping to improve on?
I think, first off, I think our approach, in those 7 games, we've been favored most of the weeks, with really the exception of the Weber game. So I think our guys have understood that to accomplish what we want on Saturday, or the Weber game was the Friday, we got to go about our business in a similar manner each week, and not. You're going to see a different scheme, maybe a different collection of talent. The stresses on our team based on what the other team brings to the table might be different, but we have to go about our business each week, and that's what I think a mature team does. I think that's what a team that has big goals can do. So I have appreciated our approach. I think on the field, our effort level has been consistent, and those are things we can control. We can't always control the other team's ability to make plays because they're trying as well. But just our approach and our effort has been on par every week. And honestly, I think the approach continues to improve. Now, I think from an improvement perspective, I know out of that game, that's probably the poorest we've tackled, and certainly some credit goes to Idaho State in that regard. I didn't think we finished blocks particularly well, so I know that's the ground-based level of football is blocking and tackling, and we have to do both of those better. And is that a product of playing 8 consecutive games? Probably to some degree, and being banged up like we were. So, we hope that we can come out of this bye week on the other side and really continue to function from a preparation perspective, effort perspective, but then an execution perspective, kind of putting it all together.
With the passing game, especially early on
Mm-hmm.
in that game, did you see anything on film specifically that, or talk to Matt, I guess, about what went on?
Well, there was a combination. I know Matt missed a few throws, overthrew Lance on the first play, overshot Trayton on a play. There was a couple times he probably had to throw early, at least one in particular because of a protection bust. And then there was a couple routes we maybe didn't run as crisply from a depth perspective. So, the passing game is typically more than just a quarterback, and it certainly is part quarterback, but it's part protection, it's part route running, and it was a little bit of all of that. And the focus typically goes to the quarterback, though, so that's why it was nice to see us work out of that. We protected better in the second half. We made some plays. We got guys open. I know our last touchdown to Willie was a coverage bust, but Matt still has to recognize it and throw a good ball, which he threw a perfect ball. Lance, and there was about a 3-play sequence. The end of the third quarter, didn't come up with a ball that he probably typically comes up with, but we went after him a couple plays later as the field flipped and he scored a touchdown. So I think there was some positives to be gained out of the second half, and we got to build off of that because we can't be one-dimensional. I think we all understand that. And, as we head down the stretch here, the passing game is going to have to be effective just as much as our running is.
As a former quarterbacks coach yourself, what would you kind of tell Matt McKay in that situation where he's throwing kind of more inaccurate balls? What would you kind of tell him on the sideline?
Well, I think just to relax a lot of times. Like the first play, sometimes you go out there and you're a little hyped up, I guess, and he put a little bit too much on it. I think for Matt, I think accuracy is one of his strengths for sure. So, if typically he's inaccurate, it's more about his footwork. It's more about his pace than it is anything else. So relax and move on to the next play. And that's hard sometimes. You get an accumulation of either a few plays in one game or maybe a couple weeks back to back. There's an effect there. So, there I hope can be a little bit of a reset in his mind this week. You look back at the big picture of 8 games. I think we're still right around 65% completion percentage. We're still in that whatever he is now, 14-1 touchdown to interception. I think those are numbers that jump off the page a little bit as far as what we're trying to do. But if you isolate it just the last 2 weeks, you can get pretty frustrated. So I think just bringing him back and fundamentally for him, I think going back and cleaning some things up, timing-wise, cleaning some things up are certainly going to be, on the task list these next couple days for sure.
How would you describe Matt's ability to kind of flip from that 3 and out like y'all had at Idaho State last week to be able to focus on the next drive ahead? How would you say he handles putting that behind him and focusing on the next drive?
Well, I think he's getting better. I think Matt lived in a world at NC State where a mistake might get him yanked, especially the tail end of his time there when he was playing. And to get beyond that and know that he can make some mistakes and we have confidence in him, I think I think that lingers maybe a little bit, but we have confidence in Matt, and, he's got to be able to not only put a play behind him, but learn from a play. There was a couple plays in the game that to the naked eye are small things, but he missed once and we came back with the same play and he corrected himself. So, those are things that I know we can build off of him, build off with him, and we need him to be a confident playmaker as we go down the stretch. He doesn't need to do it all himself. I think that's a clear message. He can make some mistakes, but he's got to have confidence to move on from those mistakes at the same time.
How do you feel about Byron's kind of play going into space?
Yeah, really pleased. To be a guy that's a role player, playing probably in the teens as far as the number of reps to jump into I think he was above 50. That's a big task, and to be able to be told that's going to happen in the morning of the game isn't the easiest thing. But he really stepped up to the challenge. He's a different player than Chase. He isn't quite the playmaker, and there's hardly anybody in our league that's the playmaker that Chase is. So pleased with him. Blake Schmidt played well. I think Sebastian continues to grow in his role, and then Blake Heel, I think is continuing to play solid football. So, I think that was the comforting thing, knowing that Chase couldn't play. That those four guys had played a lot of football. It wasn't like we had to insert someone in the mix that hadn't played at all. And now Byron in particular had to play a lot more and was called upon to do more. But at the end of it, I think we're really pleased with his efforts.
And I think there was some talk about getting run on because Chase and Callahan weren't there, but I think they only had 3.9 yards per carry. After that first drive, it seemed like you guys didn't give up a lot of yards.
Yeah, it was just a lot of rushes, and they were able to get themselves in. I think their first down production, in getting into 2nd and 6, 2nd and 5, that happened way too much, and that was more than just the D line. It was more than just missing Callahan. We were a little off, and credit to them, they're back. The primary back was a big back. It wasn't like knocking him back was probably going to be in the cards a whole lot. So when he's getting made contact at maybe 2 instead of 0 at times, and those runs are 4 and 5 instead of 2 or 3, I think that's what happened quite a bit in that game. And you look at the big picture of that game, they had 80-plus plays, all that time of possession. They really didn't have any big plays. So, 20 to 20, whatever. We gave up some yards. It was frustrating. We couldn't get off the field as much as we like, but ultimately the 9 on the scoreboard is the bottom line. And I thought we made enough plays to get them off the field enough and get the ball back to our offense, but it wasn't this prototypical game by our defense.
What have you thought about your linebacker depth? Obviously, those guys have gotten a little bit more playing time as the season has gone on.
Yeah, I look back at the beginning of the season, and we thought Nolan was really playing well and backing up both guys. And, unfortunate injury for him, and that thrust both Danny and Alex into the position where they were one play away. And I thought, through that next stretch of games, going back to Portland, they got a little bit of time. We were able to play them quite a bit more. I think between Northern Colorado and Cal Poly, they really didn't play much against Weber. I think Callahan and Troy took the lion's share of the reps. So for them now to have to step up and really rotate and be a starter collectively, I think they were ready for it. Were they perfect? No. But I thought they both made some plays in that game. Alex had a big tackle for a loss inside their 5 on a 2nd down. That was, the outcome was still in the balance. I heard Danny's name get mispronounced a whole lot during the game. I know that. That's an easy task to do, mispronounce his name. But no, those guys have really grown. And I think then what happens is those two get pulled off of special teams. So we had some guys that had to step up on special teams as well. And we really didn't see a drop-off there either. So, yeah, it's a lot of behind the scenes stuff. Those guys, their growth, and for them to step up and be able to fill that void in a game that there was a lot of things that were not from a health perspective weren't in our favor. That's what this is all about. We got to have guys ready to go. We got to have that next man up mentality that we can't. We're not going to skip a beat.
With a bye week that's fairly late in the season and right before a pretty tough stretch of games, including Cat Grays, have you or do you start to prepare a little bit ahead of time, or do you solely focus on Easter?
I think we look one opponent at a time now. I think you can. It depends on the layout of your schedule, your future opponents, all that kind of stuff. I think in a sense the healing and the back to fundamental work is about the long haul. But as far as the specific prep, I think it best serves us to be focused on Eastern Washington.
How's NIL gone so far?
You see our guys get some opportunities that are being shown, either on local channels or at the game. I think that's been a positive. I think it's still something that our supporters are probably trying to figure out and sort out. I know, generally speaking, as an athletic department, we're hands off. I mean, we provide education and guidance. I mean, and that's really what we can do. So I think there's been some good opportunities for our guys, and we got some actors out there. It looks like, and no, I think that's good. I think at the FCS level, if you're at a program that's supported well like we are, I think those opportunities now, they're not going to be maybe crazy money opportunities, but those any opportunity that a guy has to make some extra money is a good thing, and if it benefits both sides, I think that's a real positive thing. I think that's the reason for the rule. I don't think it's these crazy deals necessarily that are the reason for the rule. And I think within the grand scheme of things in FCS, I'm certain that we could probably grow it around here, and I think we have the supporters that would probably want to jump on board.
Is it something at all that comes up in recruiting, or can you use it in recruiting tool?
Well, I think you can point it out, and I think it's too early to quantify it, though. I think to put any kind of dollar figure on it right now and what that's going to equate to moving forward, I think that would be a problem. But I think we can point out that, hey, all these guys had, commercials or whatever, and these guys did this. I think we can definitely point that out. And again, I think it comes with being at a program that's supported so well. I think to me, 19+ thousand stands in the fans or fans in the stands is a much more important thing than the NIL. I know that, and to have that now 5 games into it, that's been awesome. I know we've guaranteed one more home game, and I hope we can have a crowd much the same, because that's what makes as big a difference, both on game day and the impression it makes to recruits than anything else.
Is Troy tired of seeing himself on?
I don't know. I haven't asked him. I know there's always a little bit of a joke about everybody heading to the 5th quarter in the locker room after a win, so we can all laugh about it.
Any touchdowns probably.
I suppose, yeah, yep.
Very silly question, but Halloween coming up this week. I don't know if you saw Mike Leach's post-game interview. Favorite candies for Halloween?
I would not go that deep into it. I did see it. I won't analyze candy eating nearly as much as Coach Leach. It was pretty entertaining. I don't know. I like peanut M&Ms. How's that? I wouldn't, and I don't mind candy corn, unlike Coach Leach.
You mentioned recruiting. Are you guys still dealing with the same kind of any COVID-related restrictions or anything like that, or is it kind of back to normal?
We're back to normal. In fact, what they did in the fall is our evaluations jumped from 42 to 56, and all that is you have 56 opportunities to have one coach out on the road for a day, where you can go to a high school or high school once essentially. So that was the biggest adjustment here in the fall, and we've utilized some in-person evaluations through the fall across the state of Montana. Now this week we'll get out in some different areas where we recruit and spend some time both in schools and watching games. So yeah, it's, recruiting in itself is really back to normal. I know the numbers game relative to, 6-year guys and all that's going to change because those 6-year guys are going to count. So I think that's the biggest challenge that we all face is roster turnover is different. They have allowed for some relief with transfers. That's a changing rule. Up to 7 spots to replace transfers to add onto your initial counters, which is, I don't think that's going to affect us very much. We're not going to have that many initial counters anyways, but those are the biggest changes relative to both COVID and then the transfer portal.
I know you were at Wyoming, but what was that time like for you trying to recruit when you could hardly see those guys?
Yeah, it was challenging. And there was, as remote as we were in Laramie, there was more cases of guys that we hadn't met in person than vice versa, the way things played out, because we didn't have the spring where you typically are in high schools. We didn't have the camp season where you can get around and see guys, and then you didn't have unofficial visits during the season. So I know one of the guys that I had signed from, or was the lead recruiter, I guess, we all signed him, but last December from Logan, Utah. The first time I saw him was out in the field before we played Wyoming. So hopefully those days are past where it's so much sight unseen. I think where that dynamic of getting to know someone in person, I do think it grew our ability to utilize FaceTime and Zoom, which I do think is a positive deal, especially in this day and age. But at the same time, being in person with someone is ultimately the best, whether that's on campus or in their school, in their home.
Do you try to remind you guys or yourself now going into the bye that you guys haven't really had a letdown? You've kind of beaten everybody you're supposed to. I mean, depending on what you look at, but is that something you talk about at all?
Well, I think you definitely recognize that 8 games in with 3 to play, we're positioned well. Nothing has been guaranteed to us yet. That'll come out of these weeks, and we got to treat these weeks as their own opportunities. We can't look at this, if we do this over these 3 weeks, we can't look beyond this next game, any of that. But I think the biggest thing is to recognize what got us here. It's the consistency in our preparation and our effort that I alluded to before. It's not that just because we're ranked whatever right now, everything's going to be handed to us. It's okay. We're not any different a team really ranked whatever we are today, ranked whatever we were 2 months ago. We're the same group of guys. We got to do things the same way to get to the position we ultimately want to. So. I think recognize where we're at and applaud that, but we really haven't accomplished anything yet. No one's given out any trophies for where you're at 8 weeks into the season. I know that.
I know you were pretty excited to play on ESPNU before, and now a little bit into the season, what are your program's thoughts on that ESPN deal that you have?
Yeah, I think the transition to ESPN, not only for that game and for the other game in the league, just the platform is it's much more out there. I know a college football fan that's going to flip through the channels like they maybe would have that Friday night is going to find themselves on that game whether they're looking for it or not. A college football fan that has ESPN Plus is going to look through games and find one, and that might be ours or games in our league. And then for our fans, I hope it's been outside of the blacked out game, I hope it's been a good change for them as well. And ESPN is such a recognizable brand, and it's kind of what everybody thinks of when they think of a sports station. I mean, it's pretty simple. So, I think it's been a good move for the league, and our opportunity to be one of those standalone games was a great opportunity.
Coulter, do you have anything?
Yeah, sure, Coach. I got a couple for you. Just in terms of recruiting, do you guys have territories for your assistant coaches, or how does the strategy work just in terms of who's going to go where when you guys get to recruiting?
Yeah, we each assistant coach has a territory or a region. This go around, we're doing a little bit of crossover by position, but it's primarily area recruiting. But yeah, there's 2 ways to tackle it, and what you want is I've always felt like you got 10 assistants that have a recruiting area. You want the workload to balance out pretty well. Not one guy to have too much and one guy to have too little. You want it to balance out relative to, I guess their positions, what they're called to do on game day a little bit. So our coordinators are maybe tasked to do a little bit less from on the ground perspective, but all our guys are part of it. I'm part of it. It certainly is what ultimately feeds us is recruiting and getting the right type of guys that can come here and really flourish both on and off the field.
Just from your perspective, obviously you've done recruiting a lot throughout your days and had a lot of success doing it, but how do you expect it to go your first time as a head coach at Montana State, and then what's different about recruiting to the state of Montana maybe than your previous stuff?
Well, I think right now we have an awesome opportunity to sell on all levels. Montana State is flourishing, growing, is a great place to get an education. I think our football program is, doing things both on and off the field that are showing tremendous progress. And then I think what's happening here in Bozeman and the growth and all the things that are going on, I think all those things play together. I think the airport certainly plays into it, the ease of people getting here, both from an unofficial visit perspective, but then also for us to be able to get places, for us ultimately to bring kids in on official visits. I think that plays a strong part, and I think it's a recognizable brand, and comparing it to the other two spots, there's certainly differences, and I like where we're positioned, not only in our region but our conference, and I think we got a few spots left this year. I think we're on the right track, but it's generally how you finish out the recruiting class that really is the telling sign of how you do.
And last recruiting question from me is the rent prices in Bozeman are super high, as I think everybody probably listening to this knows. Does that affect recruiting? I mean, do you have to budget in a different way? Or, I mean, I guess if you're going to be bringing guys in and someday they're going to be living off campus, how much of that is a factor just in the communication?
Well, I think it's a factor. I know initially the guys live on campus, and that's obviously a controlled price. But I think what we've tried to do is do more for our guys within the NCAA rules to offset the cost. I think rent prices are there because this is a great place to be. I think you try to balance that whole thought process out. But I know we feel like we wish there was more options for our guys. That's getting into a whole nother area, I suppose. But you try to be as upfront as you can, and like I said, offsetting the cost of living with why it's a great place to be, and that's why the costs are what they are.
And just two more for me. One, I always stand on the table for Chase Benson because I think he's one of the best. I talk about it on my show all the time, just how good a player he is. I thought Saturday was a good affirmation for that. But I mean, what does he do well? I mean, why is he so dominant on the inside from just a schematic football perspective?
Well, he's a big, strong athlete. First off, he is strong. And it's maybe not everything weight room strong necessarily, but he can play. He plays really strong, and he's got a motor that doesn't stop. I think he's a guy that has certainly proven, but the way he works, you'd never suspect it. He's tough as nails. And he's not in our defense to play in the inside, sometimes you're a guy that has to take on a bunch of guys so someone else can be freed up, and that doesn't bother him a bit. I think the unselfish nature of who he is, his work ethic, along with a bunch of ability, that's kind of the perfect package of what you're looking for inside there. You need a guy that's going to, bring his hard hat and his lunch pail, that whole deal, and I think Chase personifies that, along with being a guy that's got a whole bunch of ability.
Well, it seems like he doesn't really say two words, but that he's very beloved by his teammates. So is that just a perfect example of leading by example?
Yeah, no question. I know this. If he says anything, everybody's going to listen to it because those comments are pretty few and far between. But Yeah, he's pretty straightforward. That's not his deal to be out in front, but you need leaders like that. And we talk about that. You need leaders in all, shapes and sizes, and he's that type of guy that, he's going to do the dirty work. He's going to work his tail off. He's not going to be a guy that any one of our younger guys looks at and he's cutting any corners. So yeah, he's that piece of the puzzle within our captain group that personifies. They talk about leaders carrying water. I mean, that's who he is. He's that to a T.
Thanks, Coach.
Yep.
Thanks, Coach.
Sounds good.